What's up, everybody? It's another episode of Against.The.Galaxy podcast. I got a few of us here with me to talk about our testing from the week. I got Eric.
Hey, guys.
Nicky.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And Nick's here.
What's up, guys?
Mike couldn't be with us because he's out of town, but we've been testing with him plenty, so we got some of his thoughts that we can share with you. Before we get into all of that, we got the social media. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Hit us up on Discord. Send us decks. Send us questions, comments, concerns, whatever. We want to hear from you guys. We want to talk about what you guys want to talk about. So reach out to us there and we'll get back to you. Alright, so starting us off, we got this new format that FFPG just dropped on us. It's called Trilogy. Basically, you're going to bring 3 decks. You're going to play a match against somebody. You're going to ban one of the decks. Got a whole bunch of rules and restrictions and cool stuff, and makes it more fun. Nicky, you want to break it down for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, to start the game, you bring 3 decks, constructed like normal Premier decks, but you can only have 3 copies of each card across all 3 of your decks. So that makes it interesting if you're trying to play a couple decks with the same colors in them. One that's come up for us when we were thinking about the format a little bit was like yellow. You only have to play 3 surprise strikes. So stuff like that. Then when you sit down at the table, see their 3 combos. They see your 3 combos, and then you both at the same time ban a deck. Then you play a traditional best out of 3 series, and once you win with a deck, you can't play it anymore. So you have to win with your 2 remaining decks. Also important to note that there is currently no bans in this format, so this is the only format, aside from Twin Suns, that you can play Django, Han, TDR, and DJ. I know, Nick, you were pretty excited about this format. You got any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I get to play, well, the one you forgot. I get to play Boba Fett again. Really excited to play Boba Fett again. I know that not everybody has fond memories of Boba Fett, but you know he is the most powerful leader they've printed. So I like to play with power. I play a lot of like competitive Magic, so playing with powerful cards is kind of my shtick. So I'm excited to get back in the driver's seat with Boba, especially since we haven't had any time to play with him with the last couple sets that I've gotten. So it'll be exciting to see what we can cook up.
Yeah, I feel like updated Boba Fett's a pretty cool idea. The fact that we had to like stop brewing with him as soon as now there are 2 of them and stuff like that was printed. We didn't get to explore that portion of the meta. I think that could have been really good, but I think it was probably too good for regular Premier, and I think we're better off that we don't have it, but it'll be fun to see in Trilogy, especially when, like, if the deck's too good, people can just ban it, so we just move on from it and opens the door for other stuff.
Eric, are you interested in the Trilogies format, or is this one that you're a little less interested in?
I think it'll be cool. You have to learn 3 decks. You have to learn the lines 3 decks versus whatever the meta is going to be. So it kind of makes it more skill intensive in a way, and it's a cool idea. It's different. I've never seen in any card game where you show up with 3 decks and you get to play them. So I think that is very neat and innovative and somewhat attractive. And I'll definitely give it a try. I'm a big Django fan. I'd like to play that again. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I think we're all like excited for Eternal, just in general, when that becomes a thing, to play all this other, like all that cool stuff like Django and Boba Fett again. So kind of getting a little preview for that before we actually do get Eternal, that's kind of nice. I mean, that'll definitely be fun. So, moving on from that, we got Vegas coming up. Everybody knows that's the big show. We're now, 3 weeks away from it, and we are grinding hard to figure out what deck we are going to win Vegas with. So we broke down the testing process in a kind of interesting way. Nicky came up with this idea, and it was pretty innovative, and I think was a really interesting way to break down a pretty diverse meta. I mean, we're going into Galactics with no real tournament results to go on, so there is no established meta. We have the old meta from before Legends of the Force cards were printed, and we don't know what the Legends of the Force cards exactly are going to do to the meta, whether there's going to be new decks that are going to be an issue, whether, old decks got stronger, old decks got weaker. It's going to be a shuffle for sure. And going into an open meta, there's just a lot of decks that felt like we really needed to dedicate a lot of time to, but there's only so much time to go around. So we broke down the 10 decks that we think were the most likely to be relevant in Vegas, and between the 5 of us, we put 2 people on each deck, and we just kind of like broke out into pairs and started grinding those decks specifically. Each of us worked with each other person on the team, which was a kind of nice thing, where I might not get a ton of time to work with Nick, so to speak, but now all of a sudden on Gariello, me and him are having way more conversations. Not that any of us aren't close, but at the same time, it's nice to spend one-on-one time with each of our teammates and kind of grow the team from there. But what do you guys think about this? This was a pretty fun idea for me. You guys do stuff like this before in other games or anything like that?
Yeah, I just want to hop in quick. I would have loved if this was my idea, but I don't want to take the credit for it. This was definitely 100% Mike. Mike did a great job with this one. I guess this was just a random thought that he had while watching a baseball game, and I wish he could be here to break it down for us a little bit more, but definitely don't want to take the credit for that one away from him. I know, him listening back to that podcast, he won't be as thrilled, so definitely got to give that one to him.
Well, if you're not here, you don't get credit. I guess those are the rules.
It's definitely a cool idea. It helps create an idea of what we expect the meta to be and work towards it and trying to fix it or how to adapt to it. And I know we listed this in this order. This is just the order that we're naming the decks. And the bases is the most common base associated with the leader, but we tested other bases to the leaders. There's one in particular that I'm sure we'll talk about later, where we didn't end up with the same base. But I think it's cool. I got to work on CAD Tarkentown, which was pretty cool. Never really played CAD before. And I think the deck is cool. Has legs versus certain decks, but is fairly weak towards others, so maybe it's not something that we keep working in the future. But being able to break down the decks and being able to allocate time to them at a specific time and know how much, put games into them and figure out the lines with that specific deck just builds the knowledge and will help playing against them when you see them, if that's not the deck we end up with.
Yeah, that's the big thing too, is that not just do we get reps into the deck just in case that is the deck we end up keeping, but moving forward, let's say we all decide, crazy thought, Sabine is the best deck, and everybody's on Sabine. Well, now when we're testing Sabine, as a team, well, alright, we're gonna see still CAD Tarkentown, we're gonna see Quinlan. So now when I want to test against CAD Tarkentown, Eric and me are the ones who put the most reps in. So if Sabine is the deck, then our teammates can now test into us, and we're more experienced on the deck. We put the time into the deck. Whether we get kept it or not, we still have reps into that, and we can be more experienced pilots in the gauntlet, which will help us fine-tune the knife for Worlds when we do decide on whatever deck we are going to keep.
yeah, like you said, Will, it's nice to be able to get games in with like you, Eric, and to an extent Mike. Mostly with Mickey, just because Mickey and mine availability kind of lines up now that we've kind of been able to help hold each other accountable to learn these decks, whether to play them or whether to just learn how they work, so that way we can figure out the lines against them and do eventually pick our decks for Worlds. It's been really nice, and it's really good to see a different perspective on how you guys play the game. Like, I know that you and Nicky have talked in your testing for Quinlan, that you both play the deck very differently. You know, like one of you is a little bit more aggressive with the hand hate, and one of you is a little bit more aggressive with the units, right? So it's been fun to see how you guys played the decks differently and the different strategies and ways of thinking that we all have.
Yeah, because I mean, there's not necessarily one correct way to play a deck. There may be a better way, and we may come to, you know, a conclusion, even though I may prefer a pillage in my Quinlan deck and Nicky doesn't really do that the same way. It's relevant that there are two ways to play it, and like when we go to a big open tournament like that, you're going to play against Quinlan, and like you might face a Nicky and you might face a Will, and like those are both going to present the same leader, and you don't necessarily know how that specific opponent is going to play the deck. But the fact that we've put more eyes onto decks and more perspectives onto decks and gotten testing into those different perspectives, we're more prepared for Galactics. So I guess, I don't know, that's kind of my point to everybody listening, is just like, play as many games as you can against as many different people as you can, against as many different decks as you can, and that's going to put you in the best position, you know, to play into a big tournament. Because you may have 100,000 reps into Sabine, but it's always against that one Sabine player. And then you go to a big tournament, you face Sabine 3 times, and not one of them plays Sabine the same way that the person you test against does. And that's going to lead to you just not even really knowing the matchup whatsoever. So being able to see it from different perspectives, I think, has definitely also given us a pretty big edge into some of these decks, where they're not quite as linear as some other ones.
Yeah, overall, I think this has been a very good process for us, and I think as we continue to innovate and learn what's good and what we're not enjoying, it'll get even easier when we cut this down from 10 decks to, say, 5 or 6 decks. That's when we can spend even more time with each deck. So I guess we can hop to that.
Yeah, this man knows how to make a segue.
Yep. So we've had a week with these decks and done the testing process, and this is kind of where we came to after the first week. So you can see that there are 4 decks that we've cut, and there's 6 decks that are still live for us. For anyone just listening, the 4 that we've cut are Han 1, Cad Bane, Gar Saxon, and Anakin, and have kept Sabine, Kira, Rey, Vader, and Quinlan, and Han, sorry.
Young Han.
Yeah, young Han. And this is just really due to our testing, and you can kind of get a feel for a deck even after you're playing it, 15, 20 games, 25 to 30 is probably the range that we're trying to shoot for on each deck, but you always can get a feel for if it's going to be good or not, and after the first week, this is kind of where we got to. We can talk about it, each of our individual opinions on the decks that we've cut or the decks that we've kept, but this is where we've arrived to it, and I think it's really important to, maybe have this discussion of why we had these choices.
One other thing that I want to make a note of is that Obi-Wan, like with the Force, the new Obi-Wan, did make it into our testing. It's just that's like in the honorable mention category. That was also cut. We feel like there were better Force decks, but Obi-Wan was also a deck that we put reps into and like did get testing into and thought was, reasonable. It's something you're gonna see. But
so I know Eric already started talking about Cad Bane a little bit. What did you guys find in your testing that led us towards, or I guess away from, this deck?
One thing that kind of led us away was mainly the Kira matchup, where it seemed like if Kira was able to hold off and get to that late game, Cad couldn't really keep up, and Cad wasn't aggressive enough early enough to put enough pressure. We were talking, and we expect Kira to have a decent showing, and if that's one of the worst matchups that the deck has, it probably shouldn't be a choice. Also, in I guess playing against Willis seems like any matchup is bad against Sabine. Maybe you want to talk about that matchup a little bit, Will?
Yeah, Cad is a tough time for Sabine, but then from the Cad side, it's not really as simple as it seems. I've definitely lost some games to some good Cad players, but I've beaten some good Cad players too. But as we were testing, especially like the newer builds and where we thought that Cad needed to be for the rest of the meta, it weakened our Sabine matchup. And like without the ability to actually make the Kira matchup good, and having to weaken the Sabine matchup in order to compete with the Force decks and the other mid-range decks, I just felt like Cad was in a bad place. We went through a little run versus those two decks, and Cad just got absolutely smoked out of the water, and it kind of just got taken off of the map. I will say I had a ton of success, testing the decks against random people. Against a lot of the mid-range stuff, like, Cad can be pretty fine against it. But the fact that it wasn't able to, like, really solidify games against either the really aggressive decks or the more controlling decks, I just felt like it ended up a little bit too weak. Similarly, I think Anakin is kind of in that same boat, where, like, it's just a worse mid-range deck than I think that the format has evolved into. Anakin does some cool stuff, but at the same time, I think we'd rather be playing different red heroic leaders.
Yeah, and I think where you were heading with that point is we've been a lot more impressed with Han than we were expecting, which has led us away from Anakin. They're the same colors, and they just have different things that they're trying to do to extract additional value. But with some of the units in the new set, Han has gotten a lot better, whereas I don't know if Anakin has. I have liked Anakin with the new 2/4s, like Adigalia and Yaddle, being able to use my 2/4 to kill your 2/4 and survive, but we've found that Han can do much more powerful things than Anakin has. I guess this also, like, we can talk about the other two decks that we cut pretty quickly. Gar Saxon was kind of on the fringes, but we thought we had to respect it. After spending a little while on it, I think we came to the conclusion that Gar just wasn't there, at least in our opinion. And then the last one, which might come as a surprise, is Han 1. And really the problem there is, in the past, it had trouble with force throw decks, and now that force throw is even more prevalent because of the early force units that we got in this set, it just gets punished even harder, both because it has a low hand size and because it tries to leverage the Han flip turn to be this insanely powerful turn. But if I can kill your Han for one resource and another card in my hand, that's not going to be a great look for you guys. So, is there anything else that we want to mention on the decks that we cut before we kind of highlight what has been doing well for us?
Yeah, I guess Gar seems cool, but it just doesn't play out as cool as it sounds. I'm sure there are Gar pilots out there that are going to be disappointed that we're talking about it this way, but this is just a deck that I would love to play. I would love for it to be good. It seems like a fun, aggressive deck with some cool stuff going on, but then in practice it just isn't as powerful as like some of the other stuff you can do in the format, so it just ended up by the wayside.
I did like the ECL version, where you're ECLing 5 attack Idans or 7 attack Vaders.
Yeah.
Which is was pretty fun, but
It's a 6 attack bear, but yeah.
6 attack later. Yeah.
Still very good.
Yeah. But I agree with what you're saying.
What do you got for us? Give us a little spiel.
However you want it up, though.
Okay, alright. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Will, with Anakin. I've loved Anakin, and I've loved playing Anakin for the last couple sets now, but I think some of the things we've found that Anakin does are just not as powerful as the things that Han does in our custom, Han 2 does. So it's sad, it makes me sad, but I gotta do what I gotta do to be able to compete in Vegas. So and I'm glad we were able to kind of figure that out now, right? Instead of having to make last minute decisions or
Yeah, absolutely. I guess while we're still on this slide and still having this discussion, do we each just want to highlight maybe the top 2 decks that we're interested in? You don't have to talk about them for a long time, but I mean, just give a short little conclusions or where you've gotten to. I guess we'll start with Will.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come to no surprise to anybody that I'm very hard on for Sabine. Like, I think that's probably where I'm going to end up. I think that I respect the team's decision, and as a team, we may end up with a different number 1 deck, but Sabine's probably still going to be my number 1 deck, if we're being honest. Besides that, I'm pretty open to stuff. Like, I've had a lot of success and fun with Quinlan. I think it's a pretty powerful deck. That Han 2 deck that they've been talking about, super strong. Vader with the pilots, like I just think it's a little bit early to figure out what number 2 is on my short list, but I know Sabine's number 1.
Eric, I know you're not planning on going to Worlds, unfortunately, but do you have a short list if you were planning to go?
If I were going to Worlds and I had to pick between 2 decks, it would be between Sabine and Han. One of those 2 decks would be my choice.
So Red Heroism guy. Gotcha.
Red Heroes, figure out. Yeah.
Fair enough. Nick, where's your heart at right now?
I left my heart in San Francisco. I mean, yeah, I've been really enjoying playing Han, and I think Rey has also been on my radar. I've been, in our testing, I've been liking the matchup against Chirrut. I know it gets a little bit worse, I believe, but I think the additions were made for the reset. When they played it was the way it was. So I've been enjoying Rey and
Yeah, I think Caloran has been a real big change for the Rey versus Kira matchup, whereas before, on the Kira side, I felt pretty comfortable just running you out of units that meant anything, which is, in reference to Home 1 and Luke Skywalker, but now that you have 9 units that I just have to deal with immediately, it's starting to get to that critical density where it's hard to deal with all 9 of those effectively. I can do it, and I mean, I've still won a bunch of games against Rey, but it's definitely not as easy as it was in Set 4. That being said, I was talking about Kira a little bit. Obviously, I'm still pretty happy with Kira. I don't think there's ever going to be a time where I'm not interested in Kira. So I'd say she's still up there for me. And then, like the other guys had mentioned, we've been exploring Han a little bit more, and it's had good results in initial testing. And I've also been interested in Vader. I think the deck is extremely powerful and should win most of its game 1s. But the thing that worries me about the deck is if it becomes too popular, like it was starting to at the end of the PQ season for Set 4, people respecting the deck is going to be a huge downfall. The deck is a little fragile, and if people gun for you, I don't know if you're going to be able to stick up for yourself as well as you are with some other decks. So Vader's on my short list, but it really depends on what the meta looks like, on if I'm, willing to take that risk or not.
we'll have a lot of data to figure out what the meta is going to look like.
Or next to none, which is what makes it even more exciting or scary. I don't know.
Now it's going to be tough. You're going to be gambling because bombing run will just ruin Darth Vader's day. But like, not every deck can play bombing run, and even the decks that can aren't necessarily playing it. And if they're not, you know, you're going to have a real good time with Vader because that's just going to snowball out of control.
Yeah, but it's not even like just bombing run. Like it's bombing run. It's you know, some of the space sentinels or space ambushers, I think outmaneuver could mess up your day when timed correctly. Like, there's a variety of hate cards that a lot of decks can at least get to one of the colors that have some of those hate cards. And if we're thinking that Red Hero is going to be as good as we've already kind of hinted at, bombing run can definitely be played in Red Hero.
Yeah.
So, it's a tough one, but
There's that Jedi ship, the 1/4 that pings.
that's another card that I assume is very, very good.
Yeah, Kurt's good against Vader for sure. It's probably like alright in general, but it's very good against Vader.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of weird that you're a Jedi and you don't get the Force when you attack, but you have to be a Force.
I mean, you're a spaceship, so you don't have the Force. It's not that
But
bad.
isn't that like what's special about the Jedi ship is that they can still use the Force through it?
I don't think it's
I'm pretty sure that's canon. You're gonna have to watch the Clone Wars.
Have you ever watched Star Wars?
The answer is unfortunately no.
I kid.
Alright, going to the next one.
Alright, yeah. So while we've been doing our testing, we've also had some cards that have been testing very well for us and some that haven't been testing very well for us. So we've come up with a short list of underperformers and overperformers. Anyone want to start anywhere on the slide and tackle something that you've been either enjoying or not enjoying?
I guess right off the top, Chirrut and Kiadi are insane cards. Like, they're 100% a reason to be having the Force, wanting the Force. They're going to define this new meta. I think very strongly about not just the Han 2 blue deck that we've been mentioning, but like also things like Anakin and things like Rey Red and just different blue-red hero combinations. Like, the Force is going to be very good, and it's going to be good because these cards exist. To a lesser extent, Internet Warrior, it like as a 4/4 shielded, you can gain some life with the Force. Like it's going to fit right into that same deck. Like, those cards are all insane. Like, us putting them in the overperformers is very much saying like blue-red Force stuff has been overperforming for us. Those cards are just the highlights of it, but the deck's been very good.
Yeah, like I mentioned with like Nicky and I mentioned with Ray, Keller Beck has been phenomenal. He's added so much more to these green hero decks. It's that are looking to go a little bit more mid-range, a little bit more late game. He's just, look at the top 7 play unit, cost 3. It's like good on 7. It's like a mini U-wing. But if you get later in the game, then you can like get that Luke Skywalker you've been looking for, and you can play him into something. God forbid you have enough resources to pull a home one out of the top 7 and then get another thing back. It's been amazing to see how well Keller has been doing.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, he's not a mini U-wing. He's like a mega U-wing because you're already getting the 7/7 body. Like, a lot of times people were playing, you know what I mean, like those casino Han decks back in the day where you're just paying 7 mana for a U-wing and just hoping to hit a really strong 7 drop. And like, you're already getting your 7/7 plus something else. So it's like stronger than the U-wing even. Like, cause you're guaranteed the 7/7, and then, you know, you get a 3 drop, but you might have extra resources and you might be able to play something stronger. Maybe you get a Chirrut or a Warrior.
On the other side, I know this is one that Nicky and I were pretty high on in Qui-Gon Jinn. We were trying to equate this to like the hero version of Maul. It kind of hasn't really panned out. I tested a little bit with it in Han Green. It was fine, right? Like, that deck already has really good 7 drops in the Han Solo unit and Enth's Nest, so it kind of just felt like it was doing okay. I'm curious, Nicky, did you get a chance to really kind of play with this card? I know you were really high on it.
No, I haven't gotten as much of a chance to play with it. In my testing this week, the only yellow hero deck I had was Quinlan, which would rather play the Han unit since it can reach that 7 break point that I was so interested in with Qui-Gon. But it can do it better because Han has First Strike. I still do think Qui-Gon is a very powerful card. I'm just not sure it has a defined place in the meta right now, since we have so many other good 7 drops in Hero Yellow. I'm thinking it's possibly something that after rotation, when Han and Enfys rotate, it might become a very, very played card, but that's still yet to see. Right now, all I can say is that I haven't been as high on it as I was really hoping.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is one to put on the back burner now for when rotation happens, and maybe after that we'll have Qui-Gon look at the spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, 7 power is definitely a relevant number. The fact that it's not 6. You know what I mean? There's a lot of leaders with 7 toughness. There's a lot of big units with 7 toughness. I mean, countering back being one of them. And, I mean, it's a good number. It's a good stat line. The card's been bad, unfortunately, but hopefully, you know, it'll kind of carve out a place in the meta post-rotation when there's not quite as much competition at that spot.
Another one that I was pretty high on coming into testing, and I got a lot lower, was Ogdo. I thought it was going to have a home in Hero, where you can continually shield this card and just keep attacking for 5 and shield again and attack for 5. But that's just too many resources and too many actions that it was pretty inefficient. We also tested it in Han a little bit, and it has had varying results. It's interesting that you can play a 5/3 on turn 1. When they, trade their Battlefield Marine for it, it's fine. That trade's not a bad thing. But when you get to kill one of the new 2/4s, it's pretty good. The only issue is that it's not Force, so if you're playing one of the Force bases, unfortunately you won't be getting the Force there, because it's only a creature. So that has been the true downside of the card in those decks so far. But if there's any, Han shells with blue that don't want to play the Force, this card would be insane in those decks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've just missed triggers or if it hasn't come up yet, but Ezra gets to put counters on it.
Yeah, he definitely does. I don't know if we've played enough games with those 2 cards out on the battlefield to have missed the trigger, or...
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if I've missed that trigger or if it's just something that hasn't quite come up a lot. But, there's a little bit of synergy there. The card's good. The card's very good. We're calling it an underperformer, and I think that's mostly based on the fact that we're like, guys, this card broke the format. We don't understand how powerful it is, but it's just been kind of regular, and we might even not want it in a lot of our builds, which is just an interesting spot to have it at.
The card's been pretty silly when they heal the damage off of it and just make it a blank card. Grogu can do that.
I haven't had that come up too much, but yeah, that is something that could be kind of funny.
It is real funny.
On the other side, I've played against Avar Chris, where they're playing Jedi Consulate and they're trying to set up that super powerful turn 1 or turn 2 play, and Ogdo just eats a Jedi Counselor, and it heals 2, but then it puts 1 on it, so you still get to attack again. And that's crazy powerful. I think Jedi Consort probably could have ended up on our underperformers just the way the meta's shaken out, but that card's crazy powerful. You have to kill it on sight. I don't think enough people are playing it that this is a super relevant conversation, but it's been real good against that. I had that come up actually a bunch when I was testing it the other night, and I was like, well, maybe I was wrong about Agawagdo. This thing is just dominating right now, but there's just some certain situations where, like, either being able to press 5 damage a turn early in the game, or be able to, like, kill units and still survive and still get to keep attacking it has been very strong, but overall it just does, like Nicky was saying, not having the force, like, not being able to, like, set up your snowball to get into the Chirrut and the Kiatis and the Internet Warriors and all the force stuff that we need to have, it kind of jams stuff up.
And then the other two on the underperformers were cards that you were initially pretty high on. Well, is there anything you want to mention about those?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Infused Brawler still in theory. I think it's a pretty cool design. I feel like specifically with Avar as a leader, or another like quick way to get turn 1 force or turn 2 force, you can have a very big unit, like an overstatted unit. There may be ways to kind of like mitigate the downside a little bit, but it trades well. It was a pretty strong like early control-y card. It wasn't the aggressive card that I wanted it to be. It reminded me of an old Magic card, Keldon Marauders or something like that, where it was like a 3/3 with Vanishing. And you'd only ever get 1 shot in with it, but like, I still dealt a bunch of damage early. But it didn't end up being that card whatsoever. So yeah, I was wrong about it. I mean, that's why it's an underperformer. I was like, hey guys, this card's good, and it's not actually good. And then Avar Chris, I'm still not 100% certain that this is a bad card. I just feel like we're not in the right spot in the meta right now for it. It's not a card I'd be looking at playing. Going into Vegas, just the big control-y decks, I don't think want to be doing the Avar Chris stuff, but it's definitely still an interesting leader. It does kind of the Anakin thing where it has a really powerful flip if you can do some like bravado or some other type of attacking stuff. Like, an 8/10 is nothing to laugh at, but the fact that it's not coming down till pretty late in the game does make it a pretty tough leader.
Yeah, it's got the Palpatine problem where it just kind of comes too late. Your opponent has already fucked their leader and has wrecked your face, right?
Yeah, Palpatine's a good comparison where it's like, this is super strong, but it's just a little too late. The other thing with Avar Chris, though, the front side's good. Like, if you can find a way to just keep using the Force, Jedi Consort is an example that I've brought up earlier, but, like, just, Chirrut, Kiani, these things, like, if you want the Force and you want to be able to control yourself getting the Force, being able to just tap her to get the Force is very good. And then that opens you up to play, some of the more powerful bases that aren't Force-based. Like, you could play ECL with her if you wanted to play double green for some reason. I mean, I don't think that's actually a good deck, but, like, hypothetically, Tarkin Town, Data Vault, whatever. Like, you can play whatever base you want because you have the ability to get yourself the Force without needing your base to get the Force.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, if you have one of those bases, once she flips and you use the Force, she becomes a 4/10. Because you don't get the Force.
So you just don't.
And then you attack with her, and
Yeah,
before...
if you have Data Vault.
Oh, I thought you said if you have one of the Forces.
No.
Oh.
Yeah. He's saying once you use the Force, you won't be able to get it back if she's flipped.
Yeah.
Which is true, but, like, don't use your Force.
Like,
I mean, that's a pretty easy thing to play around, I think. Like,
it is. That's bad
like,
too. Like,
smash for 8 instead, and you're probably okay. Like, that's
yeah,
you got a big unit here. Bravado doesn't need the Force, hit you for 16. Like, good game.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made there for sure, but like when I don't get to use my like Chirrut or get to use my Kiadimundi
or Yoda, since you're flipping.
Yeah, Yoda. It's just like I get it, but I'm not thrilled about it.
And this is why she's an underperformer.
Yeah,
I mean, these are all like cool things that we could talk about, but yeah, like we have come to the conclusion that like this just didn't quite make the deck. Didn't make the cut.
Yeah, so I think we've touched on our underperformers and overperformers enough. We can move on from them, and we're actually going to try something a little new. So, one of our friends who also listens to the podcast, he who is in the water, also known as Will, has, we were talking to him this week over Discord and got to talk with him at Weeklies a little bit too. And he has this deck that he is workshopping that he wanted to get our opinions on and see if we wanted to discuss a little bit. And I think this is it's an interesting enough deck that it definitely deserves the time and can also, fill the space of being a bit more of a fun deck than keeping everything super serious all the time. So the list that we're looking at in front of us.
Well, let's read his email.
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and do that first, if you wanna.
Yeah. So, for the record, not me. His name is Will, but not me. I'm not emailing my own podcast. But all right, here he goes. He goes, hey, here's the deck list that I was talking about. I'd love some feedback on what kind of cuts to make. I'm really excited by cheating a Syndralig or Bendu into play. The discard outlets are Force Throw, Marin, Poe, and Record. Make me feel a little optimistic that you can actually curve into a Palp's return and have it be somewhat threatening. In general, I'm curious about what cards you would like to see cut, and also whether or not I should be playing the rare or common Force Granting base. I would prefer if the criticism integrated the Palp's return plan, as it is pretty easy to cut all of the combo cards and just have a presentable list here without the fatties and the lightsabers. First of all, thank you for the email, Will. Like, honestly, we do really appreciate this stuff. This stuff is exactly what we'd love to be doing the entire time on the podcast, but you guys don't email us enough, so we don't have enough to talk about. So change that up for next time.
This old man keeps saying email like it wasn't Discord, but
it doesn't actually matter.
It doesn't. I just like taking shots. I mean, that's the fun part.
You guys can get in touch with us any way you want to, and I'm going to call it an email. We'll just start right there. So
message Will on AIM.
I had my away message up. Relax. It was just song lyrics. So I think this is like, first of all, it makes a lot of sense. You can't, alright, my first glance at this deck's probably fine if we just cut all the lightsabers and the Syndraligs and the nonsense. But that's not the point of what we're doing here. And he even, specifies that. This deck is trying to do a very specific thing, and that thing is actually pretty cool. The idea is we want to get the Force early. We want to get Syndralig or something, real big like Bendu, or even Mace, the unit, into the graveyard. And then we're going to Palps return it without paying any aspect penalties because we have Anakin as our leader. So on 6 resources, we get to do something very, very powerful. It's a cool idea. It's a lot of fun. I don't know how good it is. I don't know exactly where I'd want to take this deck, but I know, Eric, you told me you played some games with this deck. Do you have any initial thoughts on it? How can we achieve that plan the best way possible?
Alright, so I did play some games, and I played this exact list, now realizing it was 75 cards. So that wasn't good.
This is the accountant on the team, by the
way. Once you figure that out, the base where you want to be hitting for 3, you're relying on that early force or even a turn 2 force to be able to start using Anakin. I played maybe like half a dozen games, and I did do the Palp's Return Bendu once, which was cool. You know, it was a turn 5, 10-10. It wasn't a blue deck, so it stuck around for a little bit. But I think moving more towards the force aspect, where you're attacking at the force, might be better. That's really like my main point, is to be able to get the force more consistently, to be able to use the villainy cards.
I think that part of the deck is actually kind of the difficult part, at least early in the game. If you lean towards the common base, there's not enough 2 and 3 drop force units in red. And if you lean towards the rare base, which is where Will started, there's not enough units that just straight up deal 3.
Right.
The A-Wing deals 3, but Adigalia doesn't. Sabine doesn't, because she does 2 and 1. So it's difficult to get the force going on turn 1, but I think if we don't mind if we start with the force on turn 2, or start generating the force on turn 2, both bases could be reasonable. And I think the choice of the 25 HP base is actually correct here. I guess a good place that I would want to start with this is trying to figure out how to whittle this 75 card deck down to a 50 card deck. Looking quickly, I see 12 blades, the Constructed Sabers, Mace's Sabers, Ahsoka's Blade, and then what is the one under 4-star? Is it Jedi something?
Knight Saber.
Knight Saber. Alright, so I think you can probably come down to 6 to 8 blades at most. If I was to spend a lot more time with this deck, I'd probably use the hypergeometric calculator to figure out what exactly the correct number of them is for the percentage that I want, but my head would originally go to 6 to 8. So if you cut 6 of those, we're down to 69 cards. If you take the... Alright. If you take the Disabling Fang Fighters to the sideboard, maybe...
Yeah, Eric, before you keep going, if we're keeping the base, being able to go, small unit turn 1 and then buff it turn 2 and attack, that's where you get your force. So you want to have that consistency of getting blades.
So the blades aren't just combo pieces. They are also a way to get the force, essentially.
That's an interesting point. So, okay, maybe it is 8 to 9 then?
So maybe I would cut the Constructed one since it's a 3-drop.
So I actually mostly agree with you in that I don't want as many lightsabers. I think I would actually play the other base. And I think that there are just other options that aren't listed here in this 75, which is going to make cutting even more difficult. But something like Gifted Street Urchin or whatever that card is, like there are a couple early force units that aren't very good, but they are, 1 and 2 drops and 3 drops that can get us the force early so that we can have the ability to play that. And, they're not embarrassing units in and of themselves. It's just they're not going to hit for 3. I know this list is somewhat tilted towards being able to hit for 3 early, but, with the A-Wings and stuff. But
I mean, we're playing all these
Fang Fighters make sense. You know what I mean? If you're thinking about just trying to deal 3, plus I also have some upside. Like, this is a 2-drop, turn 2 play that will get me the force turn 3.
That makes some sense. I'm just thinking of cards that are usually sideboard cards and trying to move those to the sideboard, seeing as we're already 15 cards over limit. Yeah. But I do see the upside on Disabling Fang Fighter for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think leaning towards the force is the more likely way to go. I think the common base would be better. And then that'll just enable our maces, like, later in the game a little bit better. I don't think we need both mace and wrecker. I think that's a pretty good spot to make some cuts. I don't mind playing more than 3 copies of that idea, but 6 is crazy.
Where do you want to lean, though, on that? Because as we'd already talked about, wrecker is the combo outlet, even if mace is generically the better card.
Yeah, so Wrecker is a bit of a combo outlet. I definitely see how blowing up your resource that happens to be the thing you want to reanimate is a pretty cool thing to have happen. I like resourcing cards that are very good. Like, it does kind of make sense.
You're blowing up your piece, but you want to curve into pouch return, so they're the same casting cost. So you're kind of blowing up your piece with wrecker, and then your next turn, you're doing your pouch return. So you're kind of doing pouch return a turn later.
You're doing it, I mean, yeah, I guess, but like, you wrecker at 6 down to 5, then you resource again, you're back at 4.
Anyway, it's still turn 6, it's not turn 5 anymore.
No, for sure.
Yeah. There's an interesting push and pull.
Wrecker is the worst enabler, obviously, for graveyard stuff.
Yeah.
But it is an enabler, which is relevant. And like resourcing your giant fatties, like that's pretty cool. Like just being able to like, well, don't want this card in my hand, throw that down, and then being able to record into the graveyard where it becomes useful again is like that's real synergy. Like that is a cool thing to do. Realistically, if we wanted to trim this deck down, Nicky, where would you have us cutting the most?
So I'd first at least start with 3-ish of the lightsabers. You could argue it's more, but if we're enjoying the idea of that, then let's cut 3 of those. Disabling Fangfighter, while it has its purposes, you can move some of those to the sideboard, seeing as we're already over on cards. I don't know how critical Cham feels to the build. It's one of our only 2 4-drops, so I could see it holding some value just on the curve. But historically, I've also played that more as a sideboard card. Getting to ramp, like, if in an ideal world, turn 2, Marin, turn 3, Cham jumps you up to 6 resources on the next turn, and then you're getting to do your thing a turn early, which is even kind of cool.
Curve growth, yeah.
Yeah. But I could see that, like Will had already mentioned, I think you could trim down to maybe 4 copies between Mace and Wrecker, hedging whichever way you like. Some of the lightsaber throws. I guess it has a good amount of synergy in our deck since we have a lot of extra lightsabers laying around, but I still just don't think it's a very powerful card.
Yeah, I think that's like an interesting card to talk about. Like, it's cool. I think like it is cool, but like sometimes you're just not even going to be able to use it, and it's just going to be a deck card. I think that if we want to play a fun deck, we can't play too many cards like that. I think if we want to do a fun thing, we can do the Palpatine's Return thing. And like that is fun, but that's going to lead to us having some dead cards already, just inherently in our hands and in our deck. And that adding lightsaber throw is going to put us into too many situations where we just don't have a functional hand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're also already talking about not being able to get the Force super early. Does that begin to invalidate Power of the Dark Side, since we can't get the Force on turn 1 without an A-Wing, which means we can't play Power of the Dark Side on turn 2?
I think personally I would be on the common base where I just need to attack with a Force unit. I think I'd build this a little bit differently at the lower part of the curve with some of those earlier, like the Codeless Force unit and just some of the other Force units that would really make Force throws strong. Like, I think with the deck as currently built and using the rare base where we're okay with A-Wing getting our 3 damage to get us the Force, force throw itself gets a lot worse because we just have so many less force units. So we're just not getting the full value there.
So far we've cut lightsaber throw, which is 3 cards. We've moved the Fang Fighters to the sideboard, brings us up to 6 cards. We've got 3 lightsabers. Do we agree on which ones?
I think the constructed lightsabers should be the ones to go. They cost 3. They don't basically. It's the one that costs the most. You can't do like lightsaber force throw if you go to like Adigalia or something along those lines.
Costing 3 is a bit of an upside with Syndralig though, because he lets you play something that's 3 or less for free, so you're getting the most amount of value out of your Syndralig.
Yeah, it's not even the best on Syndralig though. I think that it gets its most value off of non-growth, non-ability units.
I mean, shouldn't we be playing Falling Lightsaber? Isn't that the best lightsaber?
Yeah, that was also something I wanted to mention was Anakin lets you play non-units without paying an aspect cost. So do we want to play something like you mentioned, a Fallen Lightsaber? Or are there any other good villain lightsabers that we're missing in this list?
Not well versed in villain lightsabers. I mean, I'm familiar with Fallen Lightsaber and I know that's a very good card. I think that's something that we want in this deck, but outside of that, I'm not even 100% sure what the other ones are.
All these lightsabers and we can't even play Grievous.
Alright, so we're down 3, 6, 9. If we move the Chams to the board, that gets us down to 12. That gets us down to cutting 3 cards. You trim 2 maces or the Wreckers, whichever of those 2 you'd like. It brings you down to 14 cards. You have to cut 1 more. Maybe you go down to 8 lightsabers. You cut like an Ahsoka's blade or something like that.
I'm gonna be honest, I know it's like really what we're trying to do, but still trimming 1 of the Syndralics isn't that crazy, or 1 of the Bendus, or 1 of the Big Mace. Like, 1 of the giant units, we have 9 of them. That's like a pretty high number.
You know what I think is funny? Mickey's cutting the deck down to 60 cards instead of 50 cards.
This is a 75 card deck, and I just cut it down 50 cards to 60 cards. Jeez.
Wow. Mickey thinks he's playing Data Vault.
I keep thinking I'm playing Data Vault. I actually think I'm playing Magic, but we can call it Data Vault. So we still need another 10 cards on top of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards we still need to cut.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that just kind of shows how deep red heroism can get when a lot of these cards are good, and then going to different colors, Anakin too.
There's also 3 of every single card.
Right.
There's not supposed to be 3 of every single card. That's like kind of what I started talking about with Syndralig and Bendu at the very end when I thought we only needed 1 cut. But like, you're gonna need to make some significant cuts at some of the top end stuff. And like, just really trimming numbers and making things a little bit thinner. Like you were saying with Power of the Dark Side, make 3 might not be the right number, but you know, some number of them is still good.
Yeah, if power is not like your turn 2 removal spell, it's like your later game trying to get their 1 of Avenger or something along those lines, and maybe you only need 2.
Right.
Dragon's not in here. That would be a good finisher if you're aggressive to get the force early.
Yeah, I was surprised that we don't have Dragon in here. That's another interesting thing. I mean, we have so many cuts to make that it's tough to start suggesting new cards to add, but at the same time,
think the maces
being able to Palps return a Dragon sounds pretty hot.
Yeah, there's maces sabers that go with them, so maybe you keep the maces and cut the records since it's an enabler, sure, but it's later enabler, so it's not really helping.
Yeah, then you still have 9 enablers between Force Throw, Marin, and Poe. Which
I think that's plenty.
Yeah, that seems plenty. So yeah, Record can go.
Honestly, I think even just Force Throw and Marin is probably enough. Like, I don't want to cut Poe because it's such a powerful card in and of itself. And I think that, like, in order to be competitive in game, sometimes you just have to play a Poe and have it win you the game. But at the same time, Like, we are already a surplus of enablers to getting stuff to the graveyard, I feel like. So, Ricker's probably a pretty easy cut, all things considered.
From the start of that sentence, I thought we were cutting Poe, but I never wanted to end up there. Just wanted to clarify, you don't want to cut Poe, right?
I don't think that we need to cut Poe. I think that we could cut Poe because we don't need 9 enablers. But I think we play Poe because it's one of the most powerful cards you can play at 5 in this deck. So we're playing it anyways, plus it enables us, which is good.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's where I am on it, too. I just want to make sure we were on the same page.
Yeah.
So we have 6 turn 1 units that can hold a saber. And we have, right now we settled on 9 sabers. So maybe we do go down a couple more, maybe we do go down to 6.
Yeah, or like, Will had just mentioned, maybe we go to the 28 HP base, and then that will open us up to playing more ground units. We'd probably move away from the A-Wings, because those are there to support the 25 HP base. So you could play, a 1-4 for 2 that's force. You get to play Addy Gallia. There's a couple other...
Something which, it's like a 1-3 for 1.
One hidden, yeah. So you can do that in Force Throw, or that and Ahsoka's Blade on turn 1, and that's not anything to scoff at. Pretty good. I guess Ahsoka's Blade makes it a 3-3 hidden. But even then, that's fine. I think this deck is super neat, and it would be a lot of fun to play at locals. It reminds me a lot of the Rex deck that we were brewing up for a while that Mike was really interested in, and we thought had competitive legs at one point, but it's something that looks really cool, and when you do your thing is extremely powerful, but at the end of the day, it's not consistent enough when it doesn't do the thing that you probably would play this, more at a showdown or a locals, but is an insanely cool deck and something that is worth talking about and considering and looking at lists to figure out exactly what the best build of this cool deck is.
I think, the end of the day, this isn't a deck we're taking to Vegas. This isn't a deck we're putting in our gauntlet. But it's fun. This does a cool thing. The deck does a cool thing and kind of moves on. Sometimes that cool thing wins. Most of the time, that cool thing probably just doesn't even happen. But at the same time, this is a fun idea, and I think Syndraulic is a fun card to play with. I think Bendu's a great card to play with, and being able to play those cards early is a fun idea worth exploring.
Coming out on turn 5, and then attacking on turn 6 for 10, and kind of racking the board. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very good, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of games there that you just win off the back of Bendu, but...
Yeah, I think the Palps Return Bendu type stuff is really cool. I think it's probably cooler than the Syndraulic stuff, but obviously...
I mean, it's also so fragile.
We're building, within the restriction of we want to do this Syndraulic lightsaber cool thing. So, as cool as we can do it, this is probably, like we said, probably where we would end up. But I think just the idea of Palps returning off of Anakin in a heroic deck is probably cool enough that it's worth exploring. Maybe not necessarily in this show, but in a show in general, as we prepare for Vegas.
I think it's also interesting to consider this, not even just looking specifically at this deck, but what we've been doing here is an exercise in deck building. Is like Will had done for us. He brought together the best cards that he thought were in this archetype and gave us this list of 75 cards. Then we're looking at it and trying to weed it down a little bit to something that could be a playable deck. And this is really allowing us to figure out where our curve needs to be and what cards are good enough to just be staples, like Will had mentioned Sabine, or sorry, not Sabine, Poe, or what cards are too cute to actually be good, like possibly Lightsaber Throw. So while we've been discussing, yes, we've been discussing the specific deck list, but we've more just been going through the exercise of how to build a deck from the ground up and start tinkering with some of these more fringe decks.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Anakin's a cool leader. He's going to lead to a lot of interesting builds. This is just kind of one of them that's come across our desk, and we have gone over it. It's a lot of fun. I think the lightsaber stuff could be fun, but who knows? Alright, thank you guys for listening. That's the end of our Against.The.Galaxy podcast for this week. Just a reminder, do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, share, subscribe. We can't do it without you guys. We appreciate all the support we've been getting. Don't forget to reach out to us, whether it be Instagram, Discord, Twitter, whatever. Send us your list. Just like we went through Will's list, we'll go through yours. We love making a whole segment out of just a viewer submission. So hopefully we'll get some for next week. But until then, we'll get you guys on Against the Galaxy podcast.
Peace.
Later, everyone.